Hi everybody, this is Burke Lyle, and as we were recording today, it is the 20th of December, and believe it or not, in this decade, only about 12 days remain, and in about 12 days from now, will be January 1st, 2020. So what that means is we are wrapping up a decade in the NFL, we're wrapping up a decade really throughout sports, a decade in Major League Baseball, which, as you all can see, the Washington Nationals wrapped up the decade by winning a World Series. I'm sure you can see that. Just the shirt I happen to be wearing today. So anyways, today in sports, a lot is going on, really. We're kind of about 6 weeks into college basketball. Kansas is number one. Unfortunately, the team I root for two teams. I root for Georgia and the University of Maryland. Lost to Seton Hall last night, so Maryland is at 7th, lost again. So we're in the middle of college. We're kind of getting ready for conference play in college basketball. We're in the first third of the NBA and NHL seasons, which I am calling games for those leagues as well. NBA, NHL. I'm going to start doing that more often starting in January. Maybe even one or two games next week. I don't know, right before the day of Christmas. So, right now, as it's the NFL, we're heading into week 16. And we're going to talk about, right now, let's start off with Eagles versus Cowboys. So, here's the scenario. And we're going to talk about two things. So, let's talk about the Eagles first. So, they won 37-27. So, they're 7-7. And the type of team they have, maybe that's what you expect to be 7-7. And here's the thing. Look at the score. They won 37-27. Okay? I watched the coach's film version of that game on NFL Game Pass, so I know what happened. If you did not watch the game and you saw the score, your first reaction would be the Eagles won. Okay, they won fairly comfortably. Okay, good for them. No. That was not the case at all. You know what it took? It took a game-winning drive by Carson Wentz. They're down. They're trailing with 5 minutes left to go. They're trailing late in the fourth quarter. They were trailing with 30 seconds left, and they found a way to beat a Redskins team that was at the time going in was 3-10, and had weeks ago, well over 2 months ago, had fired Jay Gruden. In a team that didn't need to win at all, had nothing to play for, against a rookie quarterback and Dwayne Haskins, who really has made babies, has taken steps each week. And I felt like last week seeing him play, made some very nice throws. The offense really moved the ball in that game, much better than they had in weeks past. And their best receiver was in that game, Greg Ward Jr., who we'll tell you more about him in a minute. When he caught third down passes on the last drive and the game-winning touchdown. So overall, he had 7 catches for 61 yards in the game. An even more fascinating stat is second on the team with 21 targets. What that is, in case you don't know, is basically the quarterback throwing the ball to you. Whether that's a catch or not, that is the quarterback throwing the ball your way. So basically, the Eagles have tried to go to Greg Ward more times than really anybody else. Zach Ertz is first since then. Right? So in the last 2 weeks. So now let's kind of move on. So now, is their defense inconsistent? Yes, it is. They lost defensive battles to the Patriots. They lost that 17-10. And then they went on to lose to the Seahawks 17-9. So you allowed 34 combined points. And you scored 19. Combined points. So again, sometimes you thought it was defense. Oh, this Eagles defense is really good. I mean, you shut down somebody like Tom Brady, who again, and then you managed to, again, literally limit Russell Wilson, who is going to be the MVP frontrunner this year. Yet you managed to lose those games. And then games that you win, I mean, you rallied with 30 seconds left. And you know how they scored those extra points. The Redskins were a Hail Mary away. The Redskins drove right down the field. We're a Hail Mary away from winning the game. That's all they had to do, was throw a Hail Mary. or convert a Hail Mary. They were that close. They were very close to winning. They basically fumbled the snap, and the Eagles ran it back. So that's how you lost. So when you see these games, oh, they won by 8 points, or oh, they won by 10 points, or whatever. Oh, sometimes the score can be misleading. Like an example like that. I'm gonna be honest. Before I went through the game, when they won by 2, okay, I knew they were trailing. Okay, they managed to hold on and win. No, that was a game they very nearly lost. And on top of that, they very nearly lost to a 2-10 Giants team, where you had Eli Manning starting for the first time since week 2. That's right, week 2 since Daniel Jones was injured. That game, was not available to play, and that team was on an 8-game losing streak, and they very nearly lost to a Giants team. They're very short-handed, which again, it can be hard to really move the offense when your best receivers is Greg Ward, and the other one is J.J. Ortega-Whiteside, who's done almost nothing for the Eagles this year. That's their second best receivers, basically, in those games, has not really shown up. I think he has a lot of trouble getting open, which that's fine. He's a young receiver who going into the year is supposed to be maybe the 5th, who knows, maybe the 4th or 5th receiver on the team. So when you ask somebody like that, and maybe 6th or 7th when you want to count all the running backs that they throw to and the tight ends they throw to. So when you're asking someone like that to try to contribute, I just don't think he's ready to contribute yet. And that makes it hard. That makes it hard on Carson Wentz. That makes it hard on Doug Peterson. It's not his fault, but that's just, you get thrown into a situation like that. So Greg Ward is pretty fascinating. So he used to be a quarterback, was at the University of Houston, and was undrafted free agent in 2017, and was spent time on the Eagles practice squad, was cut by the Eagles many times. I think he showed up in the transaction reports like 16 times over the last 3 years. And he was a quarterback. He beat Patrick Mahomes, I think it was some sort of state playoff game in Texas. And then he beat Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson in the same season. And I read an article about Greg Ward on The Athletic. It was written by Zach Berman of The Athletic, who writes for the Eagles as well. Thank you, Zach Berman, for your contributions to this episode. And also as well. Okay, so the wide receivers that they've had. So their 3 best wide receivers going into the year were Nelson Aguilar, Deshaun Jackson, and Alshon Jeffrey. Not in order. In fact, it's probably could be in reverse order. Yet they've all been either very limited this year or have hardly played at all. I mean, they've never really played together. Deshaun Jackson I don't think he's played any since week 2. And all of them have been limited or hurt in very recent weeks. And Alshon Jeffrey, by the way, is on IR, so he's out for the year. And Carson Wentz, despite all this, in the last 3 weeks, they lost in week 13. 91 of 139, 801 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception, and they're 2-1. They should have beaten the Dolphins. So that's kind of the Eagles for you. So to kind of recap what I just said. 1, so things that you may have noticed. 1, their defense is there and it's not. It's inconsistent. 2, Greg Ward is their best receiver right now, no question. Wide receiver, that is. Their best receiver overall, like pass-catching weapon, would be Zach Ertz. There's no question about that at all. Those are really... He's really has been asked to step up and has been one of the best receiving tight ends in the National Football League in the last 2 seasons. And they were very dangerously close. They could have been 5-9, and that could have been it. They get beat by a Dolphins team. They very nearly lose. And against the Giants, you know what it took? They're down 17-3 at halftime. They're getting booed off the field. That's what you get in Philadelphia sports, being booed off the field. And you know what happened? They rallied. They came back. Carson Wentz led them once again against the Redskins. 5 minutes left to go. They're losing. If they don't convert and the Redskins get a defensive stop, that's it. So again, they're very lucky right now to be playing in this game against the Cowboys. On their side, let's talk about the Cowboys now. So I skimmed through the Cowboys game. I watched what happened. They beat the Rams 41-21. This is the best they've looked in weeks. Yet they are 7-7, which the Eagles, I can understand why they're 7-7. Since you look at the Eagles and you think they don't really have a true running back right now who they know they can give the ball to. or even a combination of them. I think that's still a work in progress. Yes, Miles Sanders has shown his moments, a rookie out of Penn State. Second round draft pick has had his moments, but is not really a full-time running back yet. At least that's not what I think based on the eye test. They have missed their three best receivers all year, all at some point or another. At times, especially very recently, they've had none of the three really. And secondary is a major weakness for them. So they don't really so on defense they're not really that good other than defensive line. That is their biggest strength. They're third in the National Football League in run defense, which could be a factor in today's game going up against Ezekiel Elliott. And Tony Pollard as well, who has really contributed as a backup this year. He's had a lot of nice runs for them. So, interesting stat on the Cowboys. So, I read a lot. I spend a lot of time on Pro Football Focus. It's kind of a, it's sort of like if you're an advanced baseball guy, which I am as well, probably even more so than football. Then you visit websites like Baseball Reference, Baseball Savant, StatCast. Well, Pro Football Focus. It's very advanced. There's a lot of analytics in football, stuff that you don't see in the box score. There's a lot of different stats there, right? And according to their overall, like their team overall, that's everything. Quarterback, running back, lineman, defensive line. I think linebackers, secondary, things like that. Even special teams, which I'm going to be honest, I hardly ever think about special teams at all. I mean, Bill Belichick would not be happy with me or all the special teams coaches in the National Football League. I apologize. I just really don't care that much about special teams. I know it can be important. I know it can cost teams games for sure. But the Cowboys, in sense of that, their overall rate is 91.8, which is fifth in the NFL. Which means they only trail the Saints, who are Super Bowl contenders, with their high-powered offense, which I will talk about them at the very end of the show. The 49ers, great defense, one of the best in the NFL. Really good running, really good quarterback. They really don't have very many weaknesses at all. They are definitely could be favorites in the NFC. The Ravens, they're ahead of, or they trail. These are teams they trail. The Ravens, who Lamar Jackson, best running game maybe the league has ever seen. Literally, I don't care about. Sure, the eye test can tell you how great their running game is, but then just the numbers. Like their total rushing yards and things like that. Best the league has ever seen. And the league used to be all running all the time. Right? And then the Vikings, who I think they're a good team, for sure. I think Kirk Cousins is having a good year. Dalvin Cook's one of the league leaders in rushing yards. Their defense is not as good as it used to be, like it was 2 years ago, where it was the best in the league. But it's still good, not great. That's what I'd say about their defense. Or maybe close to average. So the Vikings are a talented team, and they're the 6th seed in the very strong NFC. If you put all those teams, if you put the Vikings in the NFC East, they run away with the division. They run away with it. Same thing with the Los Angeles Rams, who are basically out of the playoffs. So here's the deal. The Cowboys are the 5th best team in the NFL, according to that metric. I think that's in terms of total pro talent, and what you see with the people at Pro Football Focus is they grade pretty much everything there is. I think they probably watch hours and hours and hours of film. They look at every single play, very detailed, and that's how they give teams and players grades for each week. In fact, I think there's a whole team of people grading, I think, each game for hours. And like I said, the grades are not released until Tuesdays. And I think Monday night games are not even released until Wednesdays, for that matter. So, again, they're hard at work going through basically the entire league. Pretty much every player in the league. Right? And despite all of that, so in terms of their eye test of the Dallas Cowboys, they are the 5th best team in the league. Which, this is astounding to me. Yet, they're 7-7. They have the same record as the Philadelphia Eagles. Right? So why is that? Why is that? I just don't know. I don't understand. And again, so let's just play a quick game. Who'd rather have a quarterback this year? Dak Prescott or Carson Wentz? It's hard to say. Wentz has been very good this year, but has not been the same. So Dak Prescott obviously has a lot more help. Right? So again, quarterback advantage Dak. Certainly in terms of numbers. He's gotten a lot more help. Running back. Cowboys. You have Ezekiel Elliott, who's going to rush for over 1,000 yards again. Again, Sure, he's not as dominant as he was. He may not win a rushing title this year. I guess it's possible he could get hot the final 2 games, but he's been very good this year. Maybe not great, but very good. You have Amari Cooper, who is due for a lot of money, right? If you put Randall Cobb on the Eagles, he'd be their number one receiver, no question. Right? Who is their number two? Or whoever, Ezekiel Elliott could be the best wide receiver in the Eagles right now. It's just hard to say. Probably not, though, but you can make an argument for that for sure, right? So receiving, offensive, the Eagles have a very good offensive line. You look at, I kind of went through their entire offensive line and Pro Football Focus, and they also grade like certain colors. So like, I'm not going to explain the whole thing, but like blue is like elite. You're the very best in all of football. Dark green's very good. Then there's kind of average, below average, and then well below average, even bad, right? Sort of like the grading system in school, like A, B, C, D, F, kind of like that. Well, or E's or whatever. So either way, that's the type of. So there, I think the Eagles have a very good offensive line. So do the Cowboys. Yet they both have the injuries to their line, probably to their weaker links of the line, but still, both lines have been very good for the last few years. That has been their strength of the team. Defensive line, Cowboys' defensive line, I think is very good. Eagles' line is one of the best in football. Secondary, Cowboys. Linebackers, Cowboys, right? So kind of 4-3 front seven. So the Cowboys are clearly more talented on paper. Clearly. Yet, I don't know how the Cowboys are 7-7. They're one of the most underachieving teams I've ever seen. I mean, every year there's disappointing teams. I mean, the Rams are underachieving. They're very disappointing this year. I mean, I thought they'd be a Super Bowl favorite. Some people thought they were going to win the Super Bowl. Yet, I think they just got caught. I think they had kind of bad luck. They kind of had bad luck. They were pretty good, down a little bit, kind of caught in a league where you have two really strong teams, sort of like kind of what the Ravens and Steelers kind of battled out earlier this decade, right? And every year there's disappointing teams. They think, they're going to be really good this year, and they're not. Underachieving, right? But the Cowboys, I feel like, are more so than any other. Like, it seems like they have just so much talent all over the field. They have so many talented players. And yet they're 7-7. I don't understand it. And sure they lost some games maybe they shouldn't have. And sure that they struggled to beat really good teams. Yet, I don't understand this. And I remember last year they're underachieving. They've really underachieved the last 3 years. They got hot last year, and you thought they'd carry over from that. Good for them, and that's why Jason Garrett is still the coach. When you think he might get fired, figures out a way not to get fired. And if they find a way to make it to the playoffs, which I think they will, then do you keep Jason Garrett again? I mean, how long is Jason Garrett going to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys for? I mean, how long is this going to last, right? I don't know. So here's something I want to talk about as well, kind of regarding the Dallas Cowboys. I want to read a few quotes. So this is Dak Prescott, who maybe, or I'll get to that in a minute. I will read a quote from him soon. But so other news from the Dallas Cowboys: Dak Prescott, and this is as of yesterday, may be limited with a shoulder injury. It happened during the Rams game, but many people did not notice. Cooper Rush is now handling first-team reps in practice. This was written by John Makota of The Athletic, who also writes for the Dallas Cowboys. So that's the report. And what I've heard people say in the article, and I'm going to be all paraphrasing, no exact quotes, they think he's good to go, and he's going to play. It looks like he's going to play for sure. I think just as limited. I don't know how it happened. And it happened early in the game, and Dak Prescott looked great. I mean, yeah, against the Rams, they did look very good. I mean, they had deep passes, good running. I mean, their offense really was the best it looked in weeks. Their defense came up for them as well. And again, like the Eagles, they were a victim to the Patriots' great defense and played in a defensive battle with the Patriots. So here is a good quote this is said from Troy Aikman, who works with Joe Buck on Fox. Quote, our 1995 team, we weren't playing very good football. It was a struggle. And then the last game of the season, we played really well, and it propelled us into the playoffs, and we won the Super Bowl. I think it's one of the reasons that Jerry Jones has such optimism that he's seen a team that was really fighting and not playing good football. Talented, and then kind of hit it at the right time and take it all the way. To play like this today, and then to go into Philadelphia in a huge game, get into the postseason, then this is as good as it can be. Okay, so from Troy Aikman was saying, was talking about the 1995 Cowboys, and I always knew they won the Super Bowl. I always knew that, but I kind of forgot about kind of that struggle part. And I should go back and watch the America's Game, the Cowboys. I should go back and watch the episode. But yes, they're like this team, very talented themselves, and they got hot and won the Super Bowl. Now the NFC that year, I don't think. I mean, I have to go back and look at it, and maybe there's some football historians who were around before then. That was right before I was born. That can tell me. But was the NFC as strong as it was that year? I don't know, but the NFC is really strong this year. I mean, they're going to have to face a team, if they win against the Eagles, like the 49ers or Seahawks right off the bat. They're going, and then if they win that, you're going to have to face them, one of those teams again, a Packers or a Saints, who they lost to the Packers and the Saints this year. And then comes the Super Bowl. The Cowboys could be, if they can get hot and win the last 3 games, have a lot of momentum. Of course, if they win today, they clinch against the Eagles. But if they do win the next game, maybe they rest, and they were one of the most talented 8-8 teams ever to ever be in the playoffs. So you don't know. Maybe they're like the Giants were in 2011. They just get hot. Sure, maybe all the teams they play are better than them, but they find a way to win. That could happen. So what Troy Aikman said, I think he makes a very good point. And maybe that's why Jerry Jones is optimistic right now. They've seen it before. Maybe they can do it again. And obviously this Eagles game. And now here's another quote said from Dak Prescott. Quote, momentum is a dangerous thing, and it's about getting it on our side. We just have to build off tonight. Simple as that. We're still not where we want to be. We haven't necessarily peaked, but we're heading in the right direction. So this was from Dak Prescott. So what Dak Prescott said is yes. So they do have momentum for sure. And if they can build off this game, and if the momentum is on their side, then they win the division and they have momentum going to the playoffs. Of course, here's another thing to think about. If they win this, they clinch. There's nothing more to play for. They are not going to catch any of the teams that are basically battling for the 1 seed. That is not going to happen. I think that, in fact, that is impossible now. So there's no way they can do that at any point in time. So what if they rest in Week 17? Which I think would be a great idea for them to. I mean, what are you playing for? You might as well accept that. What's the difference between 9-7, 8-8? You're going to have a home playoff game. So then you think about, oh, they lose that game, they don't play very well, then they got to get right back at it. Maybe everybody's rusty. I don't know. So maybe there's less momentum. Of course, they can build off being in the playoffs for sure. So that's an interesting thing. But if they lose this game, it is going to be very hard for them to make it to the playoffs. Since the Eagles, knowing the Eagles, the way they've played the last 3 weeks, if the Eagles somehow find a way to lose in kind of an all-critical game, then at that point in time, if they win, then it's going to be, if the Eagles win, then somehow Week 17, something would have to happen. The Eagles would have to lose to a team like the Giants and the Redskins. And the Cowboys would be playing the Redskins. So you have 2 underachieving, especially the Cowboys, and even certainly thought to be very talented, against 2 teams that have had really bad years, both dealing with rookie quarterbacks, and have both, if they thought they had a chance to be decent this year, that is all but gone. Basically playing against each other for possibly the number 1 overall pick. So that's what that comes down to. And I just want to talk quickly about what happened in Week 7. And again, the Eagles were their offense was a lot less shorthanded at the time. And the Cowboys destroyed them. They were way better that game. And the Eagles, basically, they fumbled twice in the first 2 drives. And you know what they did? They responded by scoring a touchdown. They had nice runs. And they ran the option, and Tavon Austin scored a 20-yard rushing touchdown. So again, their offense looked a lot more creative. On the next drive, Carson Wentz is strip sacked. and all of a sudden the Cowboys are in the red zone. And Ezekiel Elliott has a nice run, 13 yards, almost a touchdown. Doesn't matter. Next play it is. So right off the bat, it's 14-0. And in that first half, the Eagles might have made it somewhat interesting. They had 3 touchdown drives, 2 field goal drives. So that's 5 scoring drives, 17, and it's 27-7. And they win 37-10. The Eagles had 4 turnovers, 3 fumbles, and an interception, all in their own territory. So they had all in their own territory. And also, the Cowboys offense, as I just said, they look a lot more. They were more creative. They had some creative plays. They looked more unpredictable. The Eagles were just trying to, I don't know what they're just trying to. What they did didn't work. I'm gonna say that. And the Cowboys had 402 total yards, and that was 2 months ago. And the Cowboys look way better then. Way better. And that was the Eagles when they're less short. And anything it's the middle of the season. The Eagles haven't taken off yet. Maybe neither team has. Since, again, the week prior to that, the Cowboys lost to the Jets. So, again, there's a game they shouldn't have lost to. A Jets team that's lost to the Bengals and the Dolphins. Right? So, there you go. So, now you're... It's not even close. I just talked about this. The Cowboys look much better on paper right now. Despite their even record at 7-7. I don't get this. I don't get this. How they somehow got to the same point. Maybe the Cowboys losing to the Bills on Thanksgiving against the superior defense and then losing to the Bears a week later. That will do damage. And they found a way to be 6-7. So again, if the Cowboys win, all this will be over. They'll be in the playoffs, whether they're 9-7, 8-8. And as what Troy Aikman said earlier, maybe they find a way to get on this run like the Giants did twice. Or maybe like the Ravens did, where they're clearly talented, and yet they managed to beat maybe 3, if not 4 teams that are more talented than they are. So it is possible they could go on a run. Maybe they do go on a run. Since, again, the NFC is very talented. It has been very talented for the last... really 2 or 3 years. It's like comparing the Eastern Conference to the Western Conference in the NBA. West is a lot more stronger. All the teams in the playoffs are definitely, you're going to have good teams losing in the first round. The Major League Baseball, the American League has been really strong, is a lot more stronger than the National League. That has been the case for the last, say, perhaps 2 or 3 years, right? So again, super teams. The Vikings are going to have to lose in the first round. Either the Cowboys, if they win, or I'm going to say the playing against the Seahawks or 49ers. One of them is going to go down. That's probably going to be the Cowboys. Vikings or Packers or whoever, or Saints. One of them is going to go down. Same thing in the divisional round. There's a good chance that the 49ers and Seahawks could play each other in the divisional round. Another one of them is going to go down, right? So this NFC is a really strong team where I think, and if the Cowboys are in and they can get hot, I think all 6 teams have a shot to win the Super Bowl. I really do. Certainly 5 or 6 out of them. They're all capable of that. Where in the AFC, no, I don't think that's the case at all. That has been the case for the last 3 years. I think the AFC is very top-heavy. Right now, so going into this game, I know it's in Philadelphia, rough Philadelphia crowd. They desperately want to see their Eagles win. But again, they almost let a Giants team beat them in Philadelphia. They almost lost to a Redskins team where the fans took over. They're not going to beat the Cowboys. If you can't beat the Dolphins and you struggle to beat the Giants and the Redskins, possibly the 3 worst teams in the NFL, certainly 3 out of 4, maybe the Bengals may be worse, you can't beat a really talented Dallas Cowboys team. It's not going to happen. So you know what? I've been talking for half an hour about this, and I'm finally going to just make my prediction. The Cowboys come into Philadelphia and win. Is it going to be close? If the Eagles are lucky, it's probably going to be a blowout. And that's not... And I feel like I know what I'm talking about. I have watched each of the team. I've looked at the tape. I have looked at all the numbers. Eye test. Games. The Cowboys are so much better. I even saw them play against each other. It's not even close. Regardless if they're 7-7, the Eagles have no shot to win. I don't care if it's in Philadelphia. They're underdogs. They're going to lose. The Cowboys are going to win the division, and it might as well be an 8-8 team that makes the playoffs, if not a 7-9 team. And they could have a lot of momentum going into the playoffs. They're the team to watch out for. That is my prediction. And I've talked about this for 30 minutes, and that is enough. And one final word as I depart this. The Cowboys are going to beat the Eagles. I don't know how in the world the Eagles will win this. So that's a prediction. So another story around the NFC East that took place. Bruce Allen, who was hired 10 years ago this week. So that's what we're talking about here. Bruce Allen. And this is a big story in Washington, D.C. I listened to some of the show. You can find it on radio.com or Apple Podcasts. Grant and Danny on 106.7 The Fan celebrated 10 years of Bruce Allen. So with Bruce Allen, it's kind of interesting. So he's hired on December 17th, 2009. He took over for Vinny Corrado. And interesting thing about Vinny Corrado is he wanted Jim Zorn to be their head coach after Joe Gibbs retired. And he was very critical of the coaching staff and really liked the front office. In fact, this article where I got this information from, I actually started out in The Athletic, and they led me to a Washington Post article that was written on December 18th, 2009. It was written by Sally Jenkins. So it was basically explaining Bruce Allen. And again, the previous executive really liked Jim Zorn to be their coach. I have vivid memories as a kid then, I was young, of Jim Zorn being the coach of the Redskins and Joe Gibbs retiring. And apparently, Corrado is very critical of the coaching. And he liked the front office. I mean, he was very critical. I mean, there's clearly things they said in the article. So basically, their executives resigned, and Bruce Allen, with Jim Zorn, their coach at the time, which again, Jim Zorn inherited, and Jason Campbell was his quarterback at the time. And Clinton Portis was one of the better running backs in the NFL at the time, right? That was kind of their offense then. He inherited a decent Redskins team that found its way into the playoffs, that got hot, without Jason Campbell in 2007, and also just experienced the loss of Sean Taylor, one of the worst tragedies in sports history, obviously. So the Redskins got worse. They went from maybe we can be decent to or a playoff contender to what is wrong to now whatever there was not acceptable. So Bruce Allen, and I know his background, worked in Oakland, and the Raiders went to a Super Bowl there, and then went on to Tampa. They had some success there with John Gruden. And then obviously Gruden, I think him and Gruden were both fired at the same time after I think that 2008 season. So again, they had fairly well-run organizations. And now, in reading about this is I read also stuff from The Athletic. And this is like 10 years ago right now. Obviously, it's kind of opposite. Now we're kind of towards the end of Bruce Allen's tenure in Washington. That's what many people hope. In fact, I want to quote somebody, and I have no idea who that person is, but I heard them directly when I was at the Nationals parade just about 7 weeks ago. Somebody in the crowd said, "Fire," and they said, "Fire Bruce Allen," right? Well, I think that's what people in Washington want. If you're a Redskins fan, yes, I want Bruce Allen fired. And like they were 10 years ago, they're in need of a new coach. Jay Gruden got fired back in early October. It has since been Bill Callahan, who maybe that's why he's the head coach, is I think he was the head coach under Bruce Allen for a time in Oakland. He was the coach of the Raiders when they went to that Super Bowl, where they lost to the Buccaneers. So that has been their coach, but it looks like, who again? Bill Callahan's done a pretty good job. You know, it seems like they have played real football. It seems like they've won some games, but again, somebody who has not been head coach for a long time, so they're going to get a new coach. And it looks like Bruce Allen's on his way out. And at the time, they were very exciting. This was our athletic article written by Bruce Allen. They were very excited because they had this executive who had success before and very nearly won a Super Bowl. And they thought, we have one of the best executives in football. He's going to find a way to make this work. And for a time or two, he thought they were on their way to achieving something. And they can never quite get past being good or having a good year. They can never build on that. And here's who he hired. His first hire was Mike Shanahan, which we thought, wow, Mike Shanahan's our head coach. Which again, in 2009 they're 4-12. And think about this: they're 4-12, and they have a lot to build on. It's gonna take some time. It's not gonna be instant. You're not gonna get instant results. You hire Mike Shanahan, Broncos genius who won 2 Super Bowls in Denver. 24-40, he was fired after 2013. And the reason why for firing, I think he benched RG3. So whatever it was, decided to move on. Apparently he decided he was not going to play RG3 anymore, and they played Kirk Cousins. Which I remember this. I remember I was at the Falcons Redskins game. I did not go to many NFL games. I've been to maybe 9 in my lifetime, if that, maybe 7. I don't know. I don't go to them. So what? Point is, I was there when RG3 was benched and placed it in favor of Kirk Cousins. So again, it seemed like they had given up on that season. So I guess they did not think Mike Shanahan was capable of bringing their coaching more. So they fired him and they hired Jay Gruden, who again I thought would work well with RG3. I think that's what they hired him to do. Well, RG3 had his injury issues, was ineffective and hurt, and it was basically Kirk Cousins took over. Right, so that's what happened. So despite all this, despite the mediocrity, if not bad years by the Redskins, they have somehow managed to have only 2 coaches in the last 10 years, which in years past they have hired and fired so many coaches. They've had so many different quarterbacks. I mean, the quarterback's in. Think about this. Their first quarterback, Donovan McNabb in 2010, lasted 1 year. I think they gave him an extension, and then a few weeks later they benched him, so I don't know what they're doing there. They really did not handle Donovan McNabb well at all. And then I think they had other quarterbacks. I think they had 11 years. They had guys like Rex Grossman, Colt McCoy, John Beck. I think those were their quarterbacks that year. Then you had RG3 and Kirk Cousins. So you're fairly stable. If it wasn't RG3, it was Kirk Cousins. So then you're stable with Kirk Cousins for 3 years. And we'll get back to that. So I want to talk about his best draft picks. So I looked through all the draft picks. And so is Trent Williams, who's one of the best offensive linemen in football. Of course, whole nother story. They have handled Trent Williams terrible this year. In fact, had a medical scare. And if they didn't do anything about it within weeks, I think could have been very, very dangerous for him. So Trent Williams wants nothing to do with the Redskins anymore. So he may never play for them again. Then you had Ryan Kerrigan, who is a very good at times, one of the better pass rushers in the league, but not an elite level Hall of Famer. He's been there 9 years, so hit on that. Kirk Cousins, yes, you definitely hit on that one. You drafted him to be a backup quarterback for insurance for RG3. Well, that worked out great. Had 3 really good years as a starter there, including leading the playoffs. And we'll talk about that in a minute, why it didn't work out. Alfred Morris, a very good running back, was drafted right there along with RG3. 6th-round pick, had 4 very good years for them. Was one of their better running backs in recent memories. And Brandon Sheriff, an offensive tackle, made multiple Pro Bowls, came in 2015. And Jamison Crowder, who came in 2015 for 4 years, really contributed a lot for them. Nothing spectacular, not one of the better receivers in the league, but definitely one of their key receivers for a number of years. Really worked well under Kirk Cousins, and for a short time, Alex Smith. They let him go to the Jets. So again, the point is Bruce Allen has done a pretty good job of drafting. Like they've missed their fair share of picks, but they've hit on some picks for sure. Yet, whatever they couldn't do, they couldn't get past being mediocre. 9-7 was about as good as it got. When they went to the playoffs, they were in a bad, like in 2015, they're in a bad NFC East, where the Eagles, that was right before Wentz, were kind of disappointing that year. That was the end of the Chip Kelly era. The Giants, that was before they really got going for a year. They're kind of one-year wonders in 2016. They're mediocre, and then they've been bad ever since then. And then the other team, the Cowboys, Tony Romo was hurt that year. So they managed to make it to the playoffs one time, or twice. They won 2 division titles. And RG3, it was supposed to work out. Like RG3 that was one of the best rookie years in NFL history. When they decided to trust in RG3, I mean, that worked out great for them. And was one of the better, and was really good at running. I mean, he was Lamar Jackson, kind of before Lamar Jackson, except the way he played. Kind of played reckless, and really ran into contact. That's kind of what ruined his career. And they kind of misused him in a playoff game. They overplayed him when he was clearly hurt. They didn't take him out and think, well, I think we're out of the game. You know what? It's been a great year, boys. Let's just get ready for next year. That didn't happen, and RG3, I think, rushed back and was really never the same after his rookie year. So, again, that was supposed to be their promise. And if you had a really good RG3 at a really high level, are they better than what they were with Kirk Cousins? Maybe they are. Maybe they do win a few more division titles. But that was supposed to be the hope of the Redskins, and that never came. So Kirk Cousins, and I think this is one of their biggest failures of this era, is 2015. Kirk Cousins was their starting quarterback on a playoff team, and they failed to give him an extension in 2016, which would have come for cheap. It would have been less than $20 million, and I think the next year something like $23, $24 million. If a quarterback leads you to the playoffs and you have a chance to get him for a low deal, kind of a discount signing, certainly $19 million, like in today's money for an NFL quarterback, that would be quite a discount. They make well over $30 million a year now. Elite NFL quarterbacks. The ceiling, the amount of salary that they contribute to keeps getting higher and higher each and every year. That was one of the most that was something they failed to do. They completely messed up on the Kirk Cousins era, and that is why. You know what they went on to do as a replacement? Alex Smith, who appeared to be working. I mean, right around Thanksgiving last year, they looked like a team, good defense, pretty good running, solid quarterback play. They looked like a playoff team. And again, in a week at the time, NFC East, and the Cowboys got hot, and the Eagles got hot too. And all of a sudden, they went from looking like the best team into an instant the worst team in the NFC East, since I remember they got blown out by Eli Manning and Saquon Barkley, rookie year Giants, right? So they went from looking like a good team to one of the worst teams in football, and ever since then, they've been terrible. And that is why Dwayne Haskins is now their quarterback. I mean, they had to re-sign Kirk Cousins at the time. And I don't think I did as many shows at the time, but I was clearly thinking at the time, just get the deal done. Bring him back. So again, poor management. So despite all that, and by the way, since Alex Smith got hurt, they're now 4-17, and they made the playoffs just twice, 2012 and 2015, and they lost in the wild card round both times. And here's just a very brief quote, not even a quote. So this is from 106.7 The Fan, sports talk radio station, huge fan of that station, Washington, D.C. It is Ben Krimmel reports that Bruce Allen is in exile from the Redskins organization. So it seems like Bruce Allen does not fit very well in their organization. When in exile, it means it seems like he's getting ready to leave. So again, I think that it is now time to move on from Bruce Allen, and apparently also things I've heard is Dan Snyder really likes Bruce Allen. I mean, that's why he's kept him along. So again, see, think about time to fire. So let's just go briefly through the timeline. I think, 2 years, after 2 years, they brought in RG3. Then they had that down year of RG3. You fire Mike Shanahan. You bring in your new coach and Jay Gruden. And you know what? You have that bad year, the first year with your coach. So obviously, you keep the coach, Bruce Allen stays. And then they make it to the playoffs. Then they have 2 years where they could have been a playoff team, but they weren't with Kirk Cousins. So if Kirk Cousins, they're a 9-7 team, and maybe should have made it to the playoffs in 2016. I think they lost to a Giants team that was resting, was already in the playoffs. So again, that was a bad loss on them, right? So they could have made it to the playoffs more. They could have been better. But apparently 9-7 was good enough for them. Man, they went out and spent money this offseason. Obviously last year they were 7-9. So again, now I think it is time to fire Bruce Allen. It's been 10 years. Whatever they've been doing hasn't worked, and has fired 2 coaches now, which the Redskins before that, they had so many different coaches. Before Jim Zorn, they had Joe Gibbs. I think they had Norv Turner, Steve Spurrier, Marty Schottenheimer. They've had a lot of different coaches since Joe Gibbs retired the first time in the early 1990s after winning 3 Super Bowls. So again, they have really... So now, I think it's just time for a new era. And it's going to take a long time to rebuild, since who knows what direction the Eagles are going in. Who knows what direction the Cowboys are going in. Will somebody ever just get hot and take control of this division? Since last year the Cowboys won the division, there's been 14 consecutive new NFC East Division champions. And if the Cowboys win again, that'll be the first time in many years. I think since the Eagles stretched from, I think it was 2001 to 2004, where they won 4 titles in a row of the NFC East. So again, now would be the Cowboys. Now would be the time to do back-to-back. So again, the Redskins, it appears that them and the Giants are still figuring out how to win and how to build a winner. I think next year will still be the Cowboys and Eagles. So again, should Bruce Allen be fired? Yes, he should be. I think it is now time to fire Bruce Allen. It's been 10 years. And I think I've seen a stat since he got fired. Compare this to baseball. I think it's been something like 60 and something like 60 and 100. That's 100 loss season in baseball. Okay? So when you look at that figure, I think you have to fire somebody. So yes, Bruce Allen should be fired. Okay, so now, in other news, this is going to be a little more brief. So the Lions are bringing back Matt Patricia to be their head coach. So for Matt Patricia, this is his second year as being their coach. And here's the thing to keep in mind. Matthew Stafford has not played since November 3rd. So they went from a team that looked like could have been in contention to now basically without Matthew Stafford. I think they've lost every game since then. They're now 3-10-1. They lost to the Redskins. They lost to the Redskins, for crying out loud. So they have not won a game since October, or if not early November. They haven't won a game in a long time. So yeah. And Matt Patricia, being in New England, was always there when the Patriots were winning Super Bowls or in Super Bowls. He was their defensive coordinator at the time. And here's their defensive coordinator. So being a defensive coach, the Lions this year are 26th in points and 31st in passing, 31st in yards allowed. So 26 in points, that's the bottom 3/4 of the league, bottom 25%, and basically dead last in passing and yards allowed. So they have one of the very worst defenses in the NFL. And this is Matt Patricia coaching them, who has been in New England. Offense, fine. Maybe that's not on him. But defense, that's your job to coach a really good defense. And that's a shortcoming of this organization. And when they fired Jim Caldwell, they had back-to-back 7-9 seasons, and they actually made the playoffs in 2016. So I guess with Jim Caldwell, they're tired of mediocrity. So they thought they'd bring in Matt Patricia and things get better. They did not. Instead, they've gotten worse. And they're very generous to give him a third year. Since, again, I think usually 1 year is too early. 2 years, I think that's reasonable. 3 years, they're going to give you about 50 games, almost 50 games worth of coaching. So you've been given another chance. And if no improvement is shown, Matt Patricia will be fired after 2020. That's what I think. And by the way, the information I read, thank you to Nick Baumgardner and Chris Burke of The Athletic, who cover the Lions for The Athletic. So thank you to them. So again, how good is their future? I don't know. Obviously, need to bring back Matthew Stafford next year, who's again healthy. But again, you think about using the first overall pick on Matt Stafford, and they have played in just 3 playoff games and lost them all 3. So again, not what Lions fans would have wanted, not what they would have hoped for. It's going to be a long off season. It'll be interesting to see what they do, how they use their draft picks, and how they build. Since again, when you have that NFC North, you have the Packers who are not going anywhere under new coach Matt LaFleur, and you have the Vikings who once again, based on this year, I would think they'd build and be good next year too. So again, the Lions have kind of been stuck in kind of that second or third place mode pretty much for a long time. They've never really broken through and won the division. In fact, they have never won the division. They've been a wild card team since mostly who has dominated the division for the most part has been Aaron Rodgers-led Packers. So that's what they've had to compete with throughout this decade. So again, I want to see improvement from the Lions next year, if not, fire Patricia. Okay, so in other news, another firing. Yes, so we've talked about coaches keeping their jobs and we've talked about Bruce Allen. The Jaguars have fired Tom Coughlin, which, you know what the Jaguars were? They were a team that went to the conference title game just 2 short years ago, and they almost beat the Patriots. They should have beaten the Patriots. So this team was almost in the Super Bowl. And who knows, maybe they win the Super Bowl. That would have been the greatest underdog Super Bowl ever. Jaguars versus Eagles. And they almost, you talk about this team a year earlier. They were 3-13. They spend money in free agency. They have an elite level defense, especially pass rushing. They called them Saxonville. And they went to Pittsburgh and beat this, excuse me, this high-powered Steelers offense. At the height of Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. They beat a Steelers team on the road. And they almost beat the Patriots in Foxborough. They almost in the Patriots dynasty. I mean, who knows? The Patriots probably going to win the Super Bowl the next year anyways. But they could have knocked the Patriots off. And they could have been the Super Bowl. That would have been one of the greatest underdog stories ever. But they didn't. They lost that game. But he thought that was just the beginning of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Since I remember they beat the Patriots again early the next year in 2018. But since then, and again, there's 2 games left to play. And this is an outstanding article. First of all, before I say anything, I want to thank Alex Fernandez of The Athletic, who I read his article, for providing me this information for the Jacksonville Jaguars portion of this episode. Thank you. Or I'm sorry, Andre Fernandez. I want to thank Andre Fernandez for your support. So basically what he says, they need to change of direction, and that is exactly right. They've been 10-20 since then, and this is kind of year 3 coaching. I just talked about Matt Patricia giving them a 3rd year, right? Well, again, Doug Monroe and Tom Coughlin have had 3 years to work together. So this was said by their owner, Shad Khan. Quote, I determined earlier in this fall that making this move at the conclusion of the 2019 season would be in everyone's best interest. But in recent days, I considered and decided to make this change immediately, Khan stated. I thank Tom for his efforts, not only over the past 3 years, but what he did from our first seasons 25 years ago to put the Jacksonville Jaguars on the map. General Manager David Caldwell and head coach Doug Monroe will each report directly to me on an interim basis. My expectations and these of their fans for final 2 games and the 2020 season are high. Okay, so the owner, Shad Khan, decided he had enough of Tom Coughlin, who apparently, from what this quote says, is Tom Coughlin had complete control. Was sort of like a coach, and was also not really a coach. I think worked very closely with Doug Monroe, and was also an executive. I mean, that's who Tom Coughlin hired to be their coach. And it appeared at first 2 years, he said, Doug Monroe, look at Doug Monroe and Tom Coughlin. They won the division. Look how much better they are. And they almost beat the Patriots, for crying out loud. Guess what? They've gotten worse. So now all of a sudden, again, you can look like a genius one year, and then you can look like, what are you doing the next year? Or reverse order, or whatever. And that's what the Jaguars look like. And what Shad Khan saw, and here are some, and what I'm about to talk about in a minute may further explain things, said, you know what? He said was going to fire Tom Coughlin. He said, you know what, I've had enough of this. I need to fire him right now. So for the next 2 games, Shad Khan is in control of this organization. And basically their general manager and the head coach will report to Shad Khan. So Shad Khan's running the things right now until they, and he said on an interim basis, so until they find basically someone else to run the team, to have full control or a lot of control of the team. And obviously thank Tom Coughlin. I mean, if you don't remember, Tom Coughlin, before he was the Giants head coach, he was the coach of the Jaguars. In his 2nd year, he took an expansion team to the AFC Championship game, and I think they went again in 1999, so they went to 2 conference championship games. So the Jaguars had a very successful era and had a lot of success under Tom Coughlin. He made that franchise relevant. And basically, under Tom Coughlin, you think about their success. Right, I think the Jaguars had some good years after Coughlin left, but then you think about going to the conference championship game. So the Jaguars were very close to 3 Super Bowls, and especially close just 2 years ago, and who knows? I mean, while it appears that what could have been for the Jaguars and what we thought was to come, when I think about the Jaguars, you know, I'm always going to think about that team that year. I mean, I'll never forget it, you know, because I was just 2 years ago. You know, that year was kind of a change in my life, you know, not sad at all, more exciting, happy, but that year was a change in my life. And when I think about 2 years ago in my life, I look back to January 2018, I'll never forget that Jaguars team that almost went to the Super Bowl. I'll always think what could have been. If you're a Jaguars fan, you'll think about that game for years. What could have been? What could have been? I mean, it's astonishing how close they were to the Super Bowl. Really is. So here's something else. The players did not appear like Tom Coughlin, and this is not new at all. This is not new at all. This happened for years with the Giants. Michael Strahan, for a time, couldn't stand Tom Coughlin. 7 or 8 years ago, I read a biography on Plaxico Burress, was a receiver for the New York Giants under Tom Coughlin, and when they won the Super Bowl. And what happened with and what happened with and what happened with okay. Hi everybody, this is Brooke Lyle, and I just want to let everybody know that I started a video yesterday, but I had things to do and I could not finish it, so here I am. I'm in a new setting, but here I am resuming my video. So here's some news that kind of went around. So I was talking about Tom Coughlin and the Jaguars. So players do not like Tom Coughlin. This has been a thing, and might be repeating myself some here, but this has been a thing. This happened with the Giants. I read a biography on Plaxico Burress, and he was a receiver for them. Even caught the game-winning touchdown, Super Bowl 42. But he said his practices with Tom Coughlin were intense. Michael Strahan was tired of Tom Coughlin. Really, everybody was. And Tom Coughlin that year really had to change himself from, and that's why they won the Super Bowl. I think players, it took them maybe 3 or 4 years to buy into Tom Coughlin's system, but they finally did. Now it seems like he's a coach and an executive. Well, he doesn't have any title of coaching. It seems like he's working very closely with Doug Monroe. And players in Jacksonville did not like them. I don't know how long this has been apparent for. But he criticized Jalen Ramsey and Telvin Smith for skipping voluntary workouts. Which voluntary? It means you don't have to go to that, right? And I think basically said, if you want to be a true championship player then you should not be skipping workouts like that. Well, they're voluntary workouts. Maybe they're not necessarily necessary. Who knows? Or maybe the players that are there are going to be above and beyond, which is what Tom Coughlin wants. And Jalen Ramsey began sitting out games, which that was a story going on about 3 months ago, and then asked for a trade. He's now on the LA Rams. All right, so they had Jalen Ramsey, one of the best cornerbacks in all of football, on their team. And then he asked for a trade, and there it is. That's into that since he didn't like Tom Coughlin. And Telvin Smith, who was a valuable linebacker, really was very valuable for him, especially on that 2017 team. 2 players from that team, both very valuable. Telvin Smith ends up just retiring. He retired out of Northern offices. I think he's just taking a year off or something. Maybe he's going to come back without Tom Coughlin, but they couldn't stand Tom Coughlin. And players, filing grievances against the NFL Player Association, right? They did against the Jaguars, right? And the Jaguars have accounted for 25% of all cases. Now, who knows how many cases have been filed over the last 2 or 3 years? But if the Jaguars account for 1 in every 4, then that's a lot. I think it has a lot to do with Tom Coughlin, maybe Doug Monroe, who Tom Coughlin hired Doug Monroe to be their head coach. So by choosing him to be their head coach, maybe wanted a head coach that was like him. Doug Monroe was once fired by the Buffalo Bills not too long ago. So that is the case right there. And for a while it looked like a good choice, as it appeared to work. Well, at the end of the day, here they are, and Doug Monroe appears will be fired. And Tom Coughlin was at practice. Yep, he was at practice. And I think he was trying to really, so again, he was at practice, was really trying to see what was going on. Which, I don't know if the players liked it at practice or not, but I'm sure it was getting on the players at practice. I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know. But based on from what I'm hearing, and the players not liking Tom Coughlin, I assume was getting on them at practice. It was not even their head coach. This kind of reminds me of Phil Jackson. And granted, Tom Coughlin is not one of the greatest coaches in NFL history in terms of winning championships, but has won 2 Super Bowls, which is very impressive, and had a really good track record with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Was there for a lot of their franchise's first success, and then went on to coach the coach the Giants to 2 Super Bowls, which was very remarkable considering in those circumstances. The first one and especially the second one, they were not favored at all to win. They just got hot at the right time, and they won Super Bowls as underdogs twice. Very remarkable. If there's any team that was causing Patriots more trouble during their dynasty, it's probably them. But the point is not really an executive. It's more of a coach, and maybe he was trying to do somewhat of both in Jacksonville, and the players did not like it. They had enough of it, and apparently Shad Khan did too. And now, since you talk about Doug Monroe being Tom Coughlin's coach of choice now, and whether they hire or fire David Caldwell, the general manager, who appears to have less power than Tom Coughlin. I think Tom Coughlin was really in charge of everything. So at this point in time, if they decide to move on from Doug Monroe, which they should, and who knows about the rest of the front office. So either way, it looks like there's going to be a new regime in Jacksonville. And this is also a regime that signed Nick Foles to a large contract, which appears a year into this has not appeared to work out, as Gardner Minshew has gotten most of the Jaguars reps at quarterback this year. And then now, finally, yes, as I emphasized this has been quite a downfall. It went from almost beating the Patriots to now, where are they going? Who is your quarterback of the future? Right? They tried to get on Blake Bortles. That was a disaster. You lost Jalen Ramsey, you're one of the best cornerbacks in football, since he just couldn't stand the culture in Jacksonville anymore. And where is this organization going? That appeared to be just the beginning. They appeared to be the new team on the rise in the NFL back in 2017. They think they're probably if you think about the team, they're the third closest team to winning the Super Bowl. They're very nearly the Super Bowl. Now, where are they going? I don't know. I don't know the future of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I don't know how many people really do. I think the ownership does not know their future too. So a milestone that happened on Monday. Drew Brees has all-time passing touchdown record. He has 541 touchdowns, which I think that may be broken. It could be broken today. Tom Brady, I think, is at 537, which is 3 touchdowns for Tom Brady. It used to seem like nothing. Now, all of a sudden, I think it's a tall order for Tom Brady to throw 3 touchdowns against a really good Bills defense. And not only that, in recent weeks, he has not looked like a quarterback that is capable of throwing for 3 touchdown passes. So again, over the next few years, if Brady and Brees decide to keep playing, that could be an interesting battle to see who has all-time touchdown passing record and who has the most passing yards when it is all said and done, which that could be very interesting. It seems like they're both going head-to-head right now, and they could be going head-to-head for the rest of the season, and they could be meeting head-to-head in the Super Bowl. So that'll be very interesting. And for Drew Brees, who, again, shoulder surgery with the Chargers, 2005, it appeared, who knew where he's going? Well, since he joined the Saints, I looked this up, since 2006, he's first in pretty much every category. I think Tom Brady's second in pretty much all the categories. 64,536 passing yards, 461 touchdowns since 2006, his first year on the Saints. First in career completions at 6,281. Percentage is first, 67.6. Last year he's gone way up in the 70s, even broke the single season record, I think, twice. And passing yards, 76,844, so we'll get to 77,000 this year. Next year, if he keeps playing, could get to 80,000. And who knows how much, and what if Drew Brees decides to play 5 more years after this till he's 45, and over the next 5 years averages, let's say 3,000 passing yards. He could get close to 100,000 passing yards, shattering every record in touchdown passes. Let's say averages throwing 25 a year. That would be close to 700 touchdown passes. So he'd shatter every record imaginable. So would Tom Brady. So the question is, do these records keep getting broken over and over again? Since by the end of the day, Brady and Brees will have all the records. And then maybe it'll be up to Patrick Mahomes to break them, or maybe nobody will break their records. Who knows? But again, when they first came into the league, what the league was like is it was very different. So obviously, they've thrown for more passing yards later in their careers than say they did at the very beginning of their careers. And basically, what has happened is you look at so what Drew Brees has done in New Orleans is more than what Dan Marino did his entire career. And again, a different era. I think Dan Marino was the first quarterback to really put up huge numbers. I mean, you think about the numbers that John Elway put up, or Joe Montana, nowhere near as big as what these current quarterbacks have put up. Right? Different era, right? They played predominantly in the 80s and the 1990s. If you want to look at who broke the records, well, basically Dan Marino broke every record imaginable. Then Brett Favre broke all those records. Then Peyton Manning. Now it seems like Tom Brady and Drew Brees are breaking all the current records, and I think they'll be going head to head. And it'll be interesting to see who has them when it's all said and done. And not only that, Drew Brees is trying to win his second Super Bowl. I think that is very realistic. The Saints could have the number one seed. That is possible, or they could have to play in the wild card game in a game against, say, the Minnesota Vikings. So that could be a potential threat. So they could lose in the first round, or they could win the Super Bowl. That's what I've been saying about this NFC for a long time. And the Saints, who back-to-back years, they could continue to make progress, and they've had very disappointing endings in back-to-back seasons. Whether that was, remember the catch by Stephon Diggs, where they failed to tackle him, which would have ultimately ended the game at one of the most devastating losses in NFL history, or the pass interference call last year, which that's for a whole other story, right? They've come so close, so now Drew Brees is trying to win his second Super Bowl ring, while Tom Brady is trying to win his seventh. So again, you can't compare these numbers. It's hard to do. It's just different for each team. I mean, the Patriots have been consistently great. The Saints, for most of this period under Sean Payton, have been very good, but they've had to go through a few, say, if you want to call it, mini rebuilds where they've been struggling on defense. So I want to congratulate Drew Brees on breaking the NFL passing touchdown record. And once again, here's the deal: since you think about other records, like the home run record that stood for in other sports that stood for about 30 plus years, Barry Bonds, I think his record will be one day broken if you can have a power hitter that can stay consistently healthy and hit a bunch of home runs for 15, 20 years span. Say they come up when they're 20 and they play until they're 40. Like, say, a healthier version of Giancarlo Stanton, I think that record will be broken one day. You think about the all-time hit record, that'll never be broken. I mean, Ichiro technically broke it for records that MLB wins, never be broken. That will stand for probably decades, if not centuries. Probably thousands of years. Who knows how long that record will stand for. It'll never be broken. You think about other records in sports, the all-time scoring record in the NBA, that will be broken by LeBron James. LeBron James will very likely break it in a few years. So there are certain records, right, in sports. And the passing record, we talked about, the rushing record will not be broken since the league is going backwards. All-time receiving yards record. Jerry Rice just played for so long, but if you have a receiver that can play for so many years in a row, maybe Michael Thomas can break all those records if he has a long career. Who knows? But we don't know. So again, unlike other records that stood for decades, like think about Wayne Gretzky, he has 902 goals. It may be a long time before that record's breaking. I think it's Alex Ovechkin's the greatest goal scorer ever, like maybe pure goal scorer ever. Right, he's going to come very close to many records, but it was very unlikely that he will break Wayne Gretzky's record, since Wayne Gretzky had an advantage he did in an era in the NHL where scoring was king and everybody scored. Now it has been different. And then scoring is back on the rise for sure, but just a different era, right? So it's hard to compare these things, like numbers, right? So, unlike these other records, today Tom Brady could break Drew Brees' record. Well, guess what? Drew Brees could re-break the record tomorrow. And then, who knows, we could go back and forth on this throughout next year and possibly the year after. How many times are we going to celebrate the all-time touchdown record being broken? I mean, how many times are we going to celebrate it? We may be celebrating this over and over again. I mean, what is there to do? Like, when you break a record, that's usually it. Like when Brett Favre broke Dan Marino's record, it was clear that would be his record for a while, right? No one was competing against him for that record. Well, same thing when Peyton Manning broke it. Brees and Brady were still well behind Peyton Manning at the time, right? Well, now, I don't think there's ever been a record in sports where people go back and forth like this, and I want to see. So I'm gonna ask you this: will be over under 5 times where this touchdown record will keep being broken? You know what? feel like if Tom Brady continues to play the way he has and Drew Brees continues to play the way he has this year, then Brees is going to hold the record, no question about it. I just don't think Brady's going to break the record unless Drew Brees decides to retire first. It's going to be interesting. They may play for more. They may each play till they're 45, right? So for Brady, that may be 3 more years. For Drew Brees, that may be 5 more years. So at the end of the day, Drew Brees will have all the records. And the question is, who's going to break their records? Will it be Patrick Mahomes? Will it be, who knows? Will it be Trevor Lawrence? Just making a guess. Will it be, maybe this will change in the NFL. Will it be some way, somehow, be Jake Fromm? I doubt it. Who's going to break all the records? I don't know, but I think quarterback records will. I think eventually they'll say, okay, this is unbreakable, but I bet one day somebody could pass for 100,000 yards. I'm not going to rule it out, or close to it. I mean, think about all the quarterbacks of all the records now. I mean, Eli Manning's breaking John Elway's records, or Joe Montana's records. So is Philip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger, well over 50, 60,000 passing yards, well over that touchdown threshold, right? If you want to look at all the top passing records, they all belong to modern quarterbacks that played in the 2000s and 2010s. So again, very different. This is the era of passing, air raid. It's going on in college and in the NFL. If you want to win, I mean, you think about, you're gonna have to throw the ball. That's just the way it is nowadays in the NFL. So it's gonna be interesting to see. I'm very fascinated to look at the back and forth of these records. So again, thank you for listening to this video. I'm sorry if it had to be in 2 parts, but I'll try to do the best I can. And thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. In terms of football next week, it's the Christmas holidays. I'll be in and out. I might put together a few quick YouTube videos between now and then, but really, I think I'll really start talking again right before the playoffs again. I didn't do this last year, which I regret that now, but I will be doing playoff coverage this year. I'll try to do as much as I can. I'll try to release the episodes on Fridays before the game, and then once again, I will be also working on, I might do this one video next week. Maybe I'll release it on Christmas morning where I just talk about this decade in sports, since believe it or not, 2010 came almost 10 years ago, and now we're at the very end of 2019. It's been a great decade in sports. A lot has happened, so I'll just try to go through a recap summary of what I thought of this decade in sports. So again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.